Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on the Pressing On podcast, episode 8. And I'm visiting today with my friends Clay and Lauren Buckwalter. Guys, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Definitely, yeah. Thanks for having us on.
We have some important news that we want to share with our listening audience, as well as get into a story of perseverance that their family has experienced that'll hopefully encourage everybody that's listening. If you've listened to the first 7 episodes of the podcast, you know that our mission here at Pressing On is to uplift, resource, and coach hospitalized families. And you can learn more about our Pressing On programs, impact, and story at pressingon.org. I'm your host, Richie Reeder. My wife, Reagan, and I have founded the organization to serve hospitalized families. And we started the podcast this past year to amplify voices of perseverance and highlight the journey of hospitalized families so that everyone who listens will be encouraged to press on through tough times holistically. Just a note for our listeners, it means a lot when people have shared with Reagan and I over the last couple of months that even if you're not experiencing a hospitalization right now, that you're listening to the podcast and you're resonating with the stories of perseverance that are being told. Some of the best things that people have told me is simply, you know what, I'm not in a current situation right now where my child is hospitalized, or maybe I've never even been in the hospital, but I'm really encouraged by hearing how all of these families have persevered through their hospital journey. And so thanks for listening in. And today, like I mentioned, we have Clay and Lauren Buckwalter with us today to share some special news about an upcoming run that Clay has, and also talk about their NICU experience with their daughter, Blake. So our guests today on the Pressing On podcast are Clay and Lauren Buckwalter. Clay is a personal trainer and health coach with a degree in exercise science from the University of Pittsburgh, and Lauren earned her teaching degree and master's from Cal U and currently teaches middle school science virtually for Commonwealth Charter Academy here in Pennsylvania. The Buckwalters have experienced several difficult trials personally, including seeing their daughter spend nearly a week in the NICU at West Penn Hospital here in Pittsburgh when she was born. Their experience has led them to partnering with Pressing On in creative ways for which we're thankful for, including using Clay's upcoming Pittsburgh Marathon to care for hospitalized families. Clay and Lauren have been married for 8 years and reside in Irwin, PA. They have 2 kids, Roby, who just turned 5 in January, and Blake, who will be 3 when this podcast episode comes out. The Buckwalters enjoy spending time by the water with family, at the lake, and at the beach while keeping up with their young children. Once again, Clay and Lauren, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, that was a pretty good intro for us. Makes us sound official. And
Did we cover everything? I mean, what else should people know about you that we did not just talk about?
I don't think there's anything really, honestly. That's about what I tell people about us when they ask us. So,
I love it. Well, tell our listeners maybe a little bit about how you guys met and landed here in Western Pennsylvania as a couple, raising your family here. How'd you guys meet?
Go ahead.
Well, we met working at Chick-fil-A in Monroeville, if anybody's from the area. I was a recent college grad with my bachelor's degree, awaiting a teaching job. And Clay was kind of on a hiatus from school.
Yeah, hiatus from school. Yeah, that's what we'll say.
Taking a break. Taking a break.
Taking a break. Yeah.
But I had a big crush, and I made that pretty known. I think I wanted to make sure he knew I liked him so that he would maybe ask me out. So eventually he did, and we've been together ever since. About 11 years, I think, since we started dating.
Mm-hmm. Something like
Nice.
that.
Where'd you guys go on your first date together?
Eaton Park.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the most Pittsburgh answer. Yeah.
I was going to say, unless you went to Permanis, that's a true Pittsburgh couple right there.
Yep, that's us. Yep, we got dessert at Eaton Park.
Yeah, at like 10 p.m.
After Chick-fil-A shift, yep.
Oh, after you made the milkshakes for everybody that lined up at 9:30.
Yeah. Yep.
So, share maybe with our listeners, like, I know you guys are from here, but was there any thought to moving anywhere together to get your lives started? What caused you to land in Western Pennsylvania?
I think it was mostly just where Lauren was working. She got a job on the other side out towards Beaver when we were dating, and so she moved to Coriopolis on the other side of the city. And then when we got married, she was still working there, and I was working downtown at a gym in downtown Pittsburgh. So we just ended up kind of out on that side of the city. And then we moved out here, like 2 years ago now. And there was like a certain radius I had to be away from my parents and her family. So we weren't allowed within like a 20-minute zone because, we needed our space and they need their space.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of ended up in Irwin. It's a really nice area, good school district, and
Mm-hmm.
we're happy with all of it. So there wasn't really anything planned about really any aspect of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
No, in fact, I
End
mean,
up wherever.
Clay's always been like, let's go as far as possible. Let's like go to
Yeah.
Alaska. Mind you, I'm cold even when it's like 70, so that would never work for me. But he was always kind of like, let's go somewhere. And then, you get a job and you like it and you just
Mm-hmm.
things kind of revolve around that. But we also kind of came back to this area because I lost my dad.
Mm.
And my mom, I wanted to be closer to my family. My
Yeah.
priorities kind of shifted because I loved that job. I really did.
Sure.
So it was a big deal to
Yeah.
leave, but we've been really blessed with
Yeah.
our situation and we're really happy where we are now.
I know Reagan and I are very partial to the eastern suburbs of Pittsburgh. But in a similar way, when we landed here, we said jokingly, like, it's far enough away from our families, in Ohio and out in York County, that it's far enough that we can, see them for a long weekend, but it's not like anybody's showing up unannounced.
Right.
Maybe
Yeah.
we'll edit that out of the podcast later, but that was our honest response at the time. And we've been blessed, like you guys just said, to have so many great family members in the area. And like you mentioned and alluded to, like, it's super important to have that support system when you're experiencing healthcare trauma, for sure. We want to get into the Buckwalter story of perseverance here in a moment. But before we get into the family story, let's share with our listeners the big news. Clay, what big challenge are you going to be tackling during the first week of May this year?
Yeah. So this year, I'm going to run the Pittsburgh full marathon. Last year, I ran the half marathon and decided that wasn't quite miserable enough. So decided this year we're going to go for the full one. And hopefully, I'm going to help you guys out, try and raise money for you guys as well while doing it. So
Yeah,
that way it's not just, yeah.
for our listeners that might not be aware, Clay ran the half marathon in
No.
23, raised over $1,000 for the organization, was a tremendous encouragement. And it's interesting, Clay, I don't even know if we talked about this. 4 out of the last 5 years, including this year, 2024, we've had, as an organization, Pressing On has benefited as a charity from someone running. I ran several years ago. You've run 2 years in a row now. And then you throw all of the funds combined through running, and we're up over $10,000 now, which is pretty awesome. So
Oh, that's cool as heck.
thanks for continuing that kind of tradition. And let's just put a plug out there right now. As we're recording this in February of 2024, Clay's got a couple more months of training. I'm recovering from surgery, but we already have some plans in the works to get a group
Right.
together of 6
Yep.
or 8 runners that will run the
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh half or full in 2025, spring of 2025. So if you're listening to this podcast and you love to exercise through jogging, running, heck, it could be, jogging, walking, as long as you're finishing. If you'd be interested in raising funds through running next spring for Pressing On, we would love to talk to you. Send us an email at info@pressingon.org sometime
Yeah.
over the next couple of months here.
Mm-hmm.
But Lauren, maybe you can kind of lead us into the story of what happened with your daughter, Blake, because I know a lot of our listeners have spent time in the hospital, are spending time in the hospital, but Clay's desire to raise funds for Pressing On through this race didn't just come out of nowhere. Maybe take us into you guys' specific story of perseverance with your time in the hospital with your daughter.
Yeah, absolutely. So we went into the hospital on February 25th, 2021, for a scheduled induction. And that was just because we had had a normal pregnancy with our son, a normal delivery. And I just thought it would be easier to know when our second baby would be born for like childcare purposes and stuff. So we had a scheduled induction at, I
Sure.
think, 39 weeks. We went into West Penn Hospital in Pittsburgh. Everything was good, except it was still kind of like COVID-y, you know,
Yeah.
if COVID-y is a word.
It is.
But like we couldn't have visitors, or we could, but it was like one at a time, which
Mm-hmm.
like would never happen. I think they couldn't come under a certain age, so Roby couldn't come. So we kind of enjoyed some solitude
Mhm.
in the hospital, just the three of us. The calm before what we thought was going to be the storm of going home and now being parents of two. But the morning we were being discharged, the doctor came in and said, "All right, we have all your discharge paperwork ready. You're good to go." But last night, when we had Blake in the nursery, she turned a little purple while she was like sucking on a pacifier.
Oh, wow.
They were like, her lips turned purple, and we sent her down to be checked out. And like, that was the first we had heard about it. We were like
Yeah.
ready
Yeah.
to go home. And I think too, because our firstborn was a very like standard situation, we were just like, all right, we're being discharged. Like, we're ready
Mm-hmm.
to go home. We're ready to
Right.
take on what that entails. But it was very sudden. So
Yeah.
they're like handing me discharge paperwork, and then all of a sudden the pediatrician comes in and says, "I'm sorry, but I want to keep her."
So what did
So
that feel like for you guys in that moment? Because families that have experienced healthcare trauma know that things just change just like that. Like, what did that feel like as a mom and a dad when you heard the color purple and that you're not getting discharged?
I think I just immediately started crying, and like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to do, because I was like, all right, our 2-year-old is with his grandparents. Like, she's staying. Like, do we stay? Do we go? Does one of us stay? What do we do? And I think I just was like, I don't know what to do. And I think at that point, Clay kind of stepped in and made the decision. He was like, we're just going to go. We're going to go home, see our son, and we'll figure it out. Because we kind of had to figure all of that out. Who's going to watch him? What are
Mm-hmm.
we, how are we going to play this out? But I was a little bit panicked too. Like, as a mom, you have that connection.
Yeah.
But also, she had been nursing, and I was not prepared. I hadn't tried to leave anything for her. And so I just remember thinking, like, I said to the nurses, just feed her. I
Mm-hmm.
feed her formula if you have to. Like, I don't want her to go hungry. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just so concerned about like those little details of being separated from her.
Yeah. Maybe you
Yeah.
guys can talk for a second too about, there's so many families that we serve that they're striving to meet the needs of their child that's hospitalized, but they also have a child or children back at home. Like, how there's no perfect balance, but how do you go about thinking through that as a parent?
I'd say for us, the thing that helped the most is that we had grandparents so close, right?
Mm,
Like, both of our parents live, I don't know, like 30 minutes from Pittsburgh,
mm-hmm.
and like an hour from us at the time. So it was pretty simple of just like my parents and I just kind of came up with the idea of, hey, we're just gonna keep Roby there. Lauren and I are gonna come over too. We're gonna go pack our house up. We'll spend one night there or something like that, and then we came over and just stayed at my parents, so that like Roby could always be with somebody. But whenever we would go home, we go home and see him, and we deliberately would spend as much time with him as we could when we got
Mm-hmm.
home. And I remember us talking about that pretty deliberately, at one
Mm-hmm.
point, of just saying, hey, I know all this is hard and we can really only think about Blake right now, but as soon as we get home, it has to be about Roby, right? It
Yeah.
has to be, let's take care of him. Let's meet his needs as much as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
And then just find that balance. Like you said, it can never be perfect, but
Yeah.
that was definitely something we discussed a
Mm-hmm.
lot. Yeah.
I was always encouraged when we would spend time in the hospital with our daughter Micah, and a lot of our listeners know her story. If you're unfamiliar with Micah's story, you can go listen to episode 1 of the Pressing On podcast, as my wife Reagan Reeder shares all about that, from her journey to rare diagnosis of a metabolic disease to eventual liver transplant. We spent a lot of time in the hospital with Micah, And like you guys, we were always cautious to make sure that we were striving to meet or at least have Olivia's needs met at home as our older daughter. And it always struck me as a wise comment whenever somebody would be like, okay, how are you guys doing? How's Micah doing? And then the person that would kind of check in on us and say, how's Olivia doing through all of this? Even though she's healthy and she's at home, a wise person understands that it's affecting your other children emotionally, spiritually, relationally, even if it's not affecting them physically. So I appreciate you guys sharing that little nugget. Kind of back to Blake and what they were observing in her at the time. Like, what does that feel when you see that your child is transferred to the NICU? And then specifically to Blake, like, what did they find out in the coming hours?
Yeah. Well, I remember we got wheeled down, like I was wheeled down in a wheelchair, and we had to wear masks. So my mask was wet all over the inside from just me crying and crying and crying. And so we went down. She was in like one of those open rooms that has like 6 pods.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were observing her drinking bottles and sucking on a pacifier, and I guess her oxygen saturation was dropping. And so they said
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes babies just take some time to like remember to breathe while they're eating. So I guess like it's not all that uncommon, especially
Mm-hmm.
maybe because she was delivered a week early. Like maybe another week would have
Yeah.
just given her that ability. But they noticed that it was not when she nursed. So
Mm-hmm.
they kept her there for observation. They had a little camera on her that we could watch her. So I found myself refreshing that a lot, like, and
Mm-hmm.
and I was concerned. It was very hard to leave her, like, even though I knew that they were probably knew what they were doing better than I did. It was scary just thinking like, what if she's laying there and her oxygen's dropping, or
Mm-hmm.
so I had a really hard time, I think, with that separation. Um, but by I think like the third or fourth day, they said to me, well, since her oxygen doesn't drop when she's nursing, we're going to keep you here overnight
Mm.
with her.
Yeah.
And then so every time she needed to be fed, they had her hooked up to the monitors, and they said if I could like manage it for the whole night that we could take her home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it felt like a test. It was scary. Like I can remember saying to Clay, like, I feel like if I fail the test, we have to stay here
Hmm.
longer. Like, and I don't know if they intended for it to feel that way, but I felt very much like if I didn't feed her right,
Yeah.
that they were going to tell me I couldn't take her home. And
Mm-hmm.
that was really a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys sharing like what that feels like as a parent, because, our goal at Pressing On is not to normalize the NICU or anything like that, but there's so many families whose children experience the NICU but that are able to go on and live, very, very stable lives as they get discharged from the hospital. And I think as a parent, like you alluded to, like it's really scary when your child goes into an intensive care unit. But I think it's important to remind our listeners that, every situation is different. No one would ever say, hey, we completely understand. But there are many, many, many situations where a child goes in for several days, sometimes maybe several weeks, gets the care that they need, and then is able to safely go home. And so maybe you're listening to the podcast right now and you're at the hospital and your child is in the NICU. I just want to remind you right now that you're not alone. There are many families that have gone before you. And this is very well not the end of the world, that there are brighter days, that there is hope for your child to be able to go home and live a stable life. And so just want to provide that encouragement to our listeners. Before we get back to Clay and Lauren Buckwalter, just a word from our sponsors. Season 1 of the Pressing On podcast is sponsored by the Children's Organ Transplant Association. COTA, COTA, helps children and young adults who need a life-saving transplant by providing fundraising assistance and family support. They're the trusted leader in supporting transplant families financially for a lifetime. Founded in 1986, CODA is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, so funds raised to help meet transplant expenses are not considered income for families. CODA's services and guidance are provided at no charge to transplant families, and 100% of each contribution made to CODA in honor of patients helps meet transplant-related expenses, and gifts to CODA are fully tax deductible. For more information on how CODA might financially assist your family on the transplant journey, head to coda.org. That's COTA.org. We're visiting in with Clay and Lauren Buckwalter on the Pressing On podcast. This is episode 8, and we have the opportunity to hear from their NICU experience here in Pittsburgh, as well as talk about Clay's upcoming marathon to benefit Pressing On. So before we talk a little bit more about running and nutrition and stuff like that, I want to come back to how you guys felt supported in your hospital journey. Obviously, you felt like you were going to be there for a couple days and hopefully come home with a healthy child, but you were there more than just a couple of days, closer to a full week with Blake until they could get some things under control. You mentioned your families, but what were some things that people either did or said for you guys while you were in the hospital that made you feel supported?
Go ahead.
I think one of the first things I did was text Reagan and say, here we are in the NICU. Like I think I just was looking for that connection of somebody who, maybe would understand all of the things that were going through my head at the time. And so looking for that support, I reached out to church friends asking for prayer, which, I can look at all of the times in my life that we've gone through trials that's been the thing that's kept me afloat is all of the prayers, probably even prayers I didn't know people were praying for us. I just was looking for people to surround me in prayer, and that definitely helps every time.
Yeah, I'd say it was definitely it for me too, is just like getting texts from people, who would I specifically didn't tell anybody that we were in this situation. I don't like people knowing about my life and what's going on, until I have figured it all out and everything. So I specifically told nobody. So all the other people, probably my parents, who told all the people at the church who were then messaging me and things, all of those texts came in and were just so uplifting, because especially when we were there, it was only one parent could go back at a time to see the child. So we would spend hours just sitting out in the waiting room, listening to a TV that was way too loud that you couldn't turn down, and watching people come in and out and things. And it was just, the whole scenario was just extra, just frustrating and confusing. And anytime you could just get that small bit of encouragement from somebody, even just a text that just said, hey, praying for you guys, whatever. Something as small as that it was very uplifting and very helpful.
No, I appreciate you guys sharing that. I mean, it goes right in line with many of the reasons why we started Pressing On, whether it's our hospital care package program or a gas card program, our Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh program. The list goes on and on of how we serve hospitalized families. So if you're listening to this and you're in the hospital, or you have a friend or a loved one that's in the hospital, you can go to pressingon.org to request many of our free programs in the way that we serve hospitalized families. And so, again, we're visiting with Clay and Lauren Buckwalter. One last question before we talk about a little bit about coaching, personal training, Clay's run coming up. What specific advice would you guys give to families that find themselves in the hospital for the first time?
I guess just not being afraid to ask for what you need. I think we all want to think that we have control over things and that we can handle it. Or it's easy to take that feeling alone and just isolate yourself more. At least for me, I'll just hold myself up. And so just knowing when to reach out, and if you start to feel that way, then talking to people, telling them what you do need, asking for resources at the hospital. I know that a lot of times, I don't know why it is this way, but a lot of times you have to ask, do you have something that to help me with this issue? So almost you have to advocate for yourself, but the support is there. if you know to
Mm-hmm.
ask for it and look for it.
Yeah, I'd say kind of on similar lines to that is also like don't forget to discuss it with your wife or whoever, right? Because like we were worried about different things, right? Like when they told us Blake had to stay overnight, Lauren's first instinct was, well, what do I do? How do I take care of her the best? And my first instinct was, well, what do we do about the family, right? How do
Yeah.
we control
Yeah.
the larger picture more or less, So whenever something like that would happen, or just on the drive to and from the hospital, if we just kept talking with each other about our experiences, it
Mm-hmm.
gave us a more well-rounded view of what was actually happening. Lauren's a more emotional person. I'm a more logical person. So we look at everything from the exact opposite sides. And if we wouldn't have kept talking with each other and communicating with
Yeah.
each other, it would have been twice as bad. So just kind of, definitely lean on to your spouse during this time. See their side of it. Don't try to give them answers. That doesn't work, or solutions. But just kind of feed off each other's ideas and energies and what you need and give and take between each other the whole time. Yeah.
That's solid advice right there. I mean, like, that's
Hmm.
a great example of awesome teamwork. Like, we're not supposed to be, identical to our partners or anything like that, but to be able to lean into the strengths and the ideas that each one has is super important. Clay, this is more of a question for you, like as a personal trainer. I know, many of our listeners are in the hospital or find themselves in the hospital frequently with their children. And it can be really hard to keep yourself nourished and eat well and stay hydrated and stuff like that. Like, even if it's not specific to the hospital, like what are some healthy snacks or meal options that you could envision could actually be really helpful to giving hospitalized parents the energy that they need to stay in good health so that they can advocate for their kids?
Yeah, this is definitely it's a great question, and it's not something people are going to think about because like their first and only thought is how do I take care of my child, right? But if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else properly. If you're run down
Mm-hmm.
mentally, physically, whatever, you can't do anything
Yeah.
at 100%. And this wasn't even something I did well at all when we were in the hospital. I would just show up and just be like, all right, I'm here for the day. I guess I won't eat,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe they'll bring by a sandwich or something that I can have. So I would just say, think about yourself and about your own needs. I think at our hospital there was always like a microwave or something in the waiting room or something like that. You can always go home one night and just make 5 meals and put them in a Tupperware and take that with
Mm-hmm.
you, just to make sure that hey, you will always have food, you will always have whatever you need to stay up and up on this. So you can be there 100% when you need to be there. So,
Yeah.
just have meals, make sure they're high in protein, fiber, vegetables, all the things your body needs. And
Mm-hmm.
definitely don't forget to stay hydrated as well.
Yeah.
Your body's mostly water. If you get overly dehydrated or something, once again, you can't be there for your spouse, for the kids, for whoever else. So um, don't forget to
Yeah.
drink up on plenty of fluids too. Yeah.
No, that's really good. That's really good. I always, well, it's not even a joke, it's the truth. Like, I always say that I eat everything in sight when I'm stressed out and when we're in the
Hmm.
hospital. And my wife, Reagan, forgets to eat. It's like we're polar opposites. Like, I have to
Yeah.
drag her to go get some nutrition. And then, like, I eat enough for both of us. So
That would be
everybody
us too. Yeah.
responds. Yeah.
Hmm.
Everybody responds differently to stress. And many of us, whether it's fight or flight, like, many times we either forget to eat or we eat everything in sight. And that's another plug for one of the Pressing On programs at pressingon.org. Our hospital care packages have some healthy snacks in them, as well as, a water bottle with some Propel packets with some nutrients in them. Because, like my wife Reagan, many parents forget to eat while they're in the hospital, or you don't give yourself permission to leave the room to go get some
Hmm.
food.
Yeah.
And so anything that we can do to encourage parents to take care of themselves, whether that be, personal hygiene or your nutrition or hydration, or to go get a meal, you're going to be able to advocate for your child and take care of your child better when you're as healthy as possible. Just want to take a moment to remind our listeners to follow along with all things Pressing On the various social media platforms. So to stay up to date with our journey to uplift hospitalized families, you can follow along on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Just search for Pressing On PGH on most platforms. You'll find several clips of our podcast episodes, including this one as well, that you can be encouraged by and share with others that are on their hospitalization journey. So back to marathon talk. We're talking with Clay and Lauren Buckwalter. Clay is tackling the Pittsburgh Marathon, 26.2 miles on Sunday, May the 5th here in 2024. Clay, you were sharing a little bit before we hit record. How is the marathon training going right now?
Poor. Yeah, but we're just gonna throw it out there. It is poor for all the people out there who think I'm gonna, that I'm a superhero or something or superhuman. No, been dealing with some foot issues that have stopped me from running. I kind of got a stomach bug going right now that stopped me from running. So just a little bit behind. But at the end of the day, I'm not trying to set the world record or anything. I'm gonna cross the finish line and not die are really the two goals. So a little undertrained is better than injured. So yeah. I took the proper time off to try to rehab my foot a little bit, and I'm kind of working around that. So hopefully this week I can get back to getting the solid runs in and getting that training back up to where it's supposed to be. Yeah.
So if folks want to know how they can partner with Clay as he completes the 26.2 miles of the Pittsburgh Marathon, starting the first week of March here, we will have pressingon.org/Clay's Run live to the general public. You can see a brief video that we took of Clay running the marathon last year. You can see a couple of quotes there on why that's important to Clay to raise money during his marathon training for Pressing On. You can donate there, whether it's $1 per mile or maybe $2 per mile, $5, maybe even $10 per mile. And Clay, tell everybody what your goal of fundraising is here for the spring of 2024.
Yeah, so last year I raised just over $1,000, I think. So double the miles, double the goal. So this year I'm hopefully gonna shoot for about $2,000 is the goal. So
there you go. So you can go to pressingon.org/Clay's Run to be able to partner with him in that endeavor. So we just want to say thanks for making Pressing On your charity of choice. That's definitely not something that you had to do or that we expected at all. But maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit why you decided to kind of up the ante with your marathon training and start raising funds for Pressing On.
Yeah, so I originally started running just because it was something I was bad at and I didn't like doing it. So I realized the only reason I didn't like it is because it was hard and I wasn't good at it, and that made it more hard. So I was like, I'll start running. It's really good for you too, get the heart health and all of that. So I started running, and I signed up for the half marathon last year, and there was a little portion that said, is there a charity you want to run for? And I looked through all of them, and I was like, I got no association with any of these, but I didn't even know that was an option. So instantly, you and Reagan came to my mind. For those that don't know, I've known you guys since I was 10 years old, something.
We moved to the
that.
area here 17 years ago, so that's about how long we've known you. Yeah.
So right around there. So I mean, even if we didn't have a daughter in the NICU, I probably would have thought of you guys too, because everything you guys do is awesome, and you guys help so many people, and it's just such a cool thing, and I think you guys are great. So I would have thought about it anyway. But then our daughter being in the NICU, we also thought of it more because of that. But yeah, then it was just, if I'm going to run this thing, I might as well try to help people out.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of a lot of people doing marathons and things too, is you get healthy, but then you can also use it to help other people as much as possible.
So,
I know that was it, really.
I appreciate you saying that, Lauren. I know that it's a collaborative effort. When a family decides, hey, one of the spouses is going to run a really long race like this. How's Clay's training affected you and the kids thus far? If you can reflect on last year, but then also this year.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely been times where I'm like, do you have to leave for 2 hours to run, really? But I will say, just like we were talking about with our NICU experience, it's all about that communication. Clay writes on the calendar how many miles he has to run each day. So I kind of get an idea. Our children are in daycare 3 days a week. So he tries to make like his longer runs on days where it's not about childcare, so that like it's kind of just part of our days. So I feel like just having that communication and being mindful of like how we can lay out our week to not put a lot on the other person. So
Mm-hmm.
just all about that communication.
No, that is a good example of like communicating well. Now, has he tried to pull you into any of these efforts?
I have to blame myself. I would not say he roped me in, but his last half marathon, I was cheering from the sidelines, and he was running past camels, and like it was in Lancaster, well, Strasburg, Pennsylvania, and he's like, I got a picture with a camel on my half marathon, and I said, next year I'm running that with you, and I made it known to a lot of people. So now I'm telling all of the listeners,
Wow.
I plan on starting training today because I have not run in a very long time. But yeah, I roped myself in. But I think,
Nice.
part of it is, it's kind of contagious to see like those small victories and the training and the hard work that goes into it. And then, that big celebration at the end. So
And maybe seeing a camel. I mean, that's the icing on top. It had nothing to do with running or anything. I told her I took a picture of the camel, and she was like, "Oh, I'll do it."
yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
word.
So
Yeah,
I
I
just
mean,
think, it's been contagious just to see that transformation and the excitement, and it made me want to be a part of it, I guess.
yeah. Well, hey, like we said earlier, we are building a running community here of families that are pressing on for other hospitalized families. So if you are a runner or you desire to tackle either a half marathon or a full marathon and you're listening to this podcast, this is our announcement saying, hey, spring of 2025, we're looking to get a group of people together to band together and press on to tackle that 13.1 or 26.2 miles. So send us an email, info@pressingon.org. We would love to sync up with you if you'd like to take your running to the next level and allow Pressing On to be your charity of choice starting next spring. So we're visiting with Clay and Lauren Buckwalter here on episode 8 of the Pressing On podcast. Again, our podcast purpose is to amplify voices of perseverance like the Buckwalters and highlight the journey of hospitalized families so that everyone who listens will be encouraged to press on through tough times holistically. Before we go here, I've got a couple of rapid fire questions for you guys if you're game to answer them for our listeners.
Let's go. This is probably also a good time to tell Lauren that I already told you that she'll run the half marathon next year for you guys. So she's already signed up for that, but she's just now learning about it.
Gotcha.
Do it.
Gotcha. Well, hey, we'll all do it together. So there's 4 short questions. 3 are just kind of humanizing you guys, getting to know you guys for our listeners. The 4th one is kind of a more introspective question on perseverance. But what is your favorite meal to cook at home?
Oh, that's easy.
So easy.
Pizza.
Homemade pizza.
Yeah.
Nice. How'd you guys stumble upon that?
I just really love cooking, and I've just watching pizza videos on YouTube. I just kind of really got into making pizza, and now a lot of Friday nights at home we make homemade pizzas. Yeah.
Do you make like your own dough and own sauce and that kind of stuff?
Everything's homemade. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
And
hey,
I like it because I can eat it all. Because I sometimes can't have a lot of dairy. It'll mess with my stomach. So like making it at home, I can choose things that don't bother me and eat the whole pizza. It's great.
That's awesome. How do you guys cook it? Do you bake it in the oven? Do you have like a pizza oven that you have like on your back patio? People do it lots of different ways, but how do you cook it?
Yeah, right now I just use cast iron pans. I've been
Mm-hmm.
looking into getting a pizza oven. I've heard they're less fun when you have little kids because, you're trying to do this thing and you can make one pizza at a time and it comes out and your kids eat the whole thing. And then you're, trying to make another one while they're fighting and things. So I'm going to wait a couple years on one of those. But there will be a pizza oven on our back porch at some point in our
Love
life.
it.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
it. Well, that goes in line with another one of our shared loves, and that's smoking meat as well, because
yeah.
we both spend a ton of time in our backyard smoking meat. That could be another podcast episode just by itself someday.
I'll come back for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the second question for you guys as a couple. Which do you prefer, late nights or early mornings?
We're opposite on this one. I could stay up super late. I don't because I have to be up early, but I am much more of a night owl, and Clay is the morning person for sure.
If it's Lauren, she puts up with a lot, but one of the things she always puts up with is at 9:30 the TV is off no matter what we're doing. Like it could be the cliff, like at the end of an episode, we're about to figure out who did it. 9:30, boom, done. We're going to bed.
That is true.
And she often gets annoyed with me because I don't even ask her if she's done watching TV. It's practically midnight. We're going to bed. So I'm definitely a morning person, and she's a night owl. Yeah.
Got it. Third question, rapid fire. Favorite show to watch together?
That's a tough one. What would you say? That's a hard one.
I guess, I don't know, British baking?
Oh.
Maybe the Great British Bake Show,
Okay.
New Girl, The Office.
New Girl. There's a show that has a creek in the name of it that you can't technically say the first word, but you can. It's on Netflix. We really like that show a lot too.
Picking up what you're putting down there. I got you.
Yeah. So there's a bunch.
That's just what we do.
Yeah, there's a bunch. We like binge watching shows together. So
love it. So yeah, that's so true. Here's the last rapid fire question. Yeah, I think that everybody has a different definition of this, but what does the word perseverance mean to you?
To keep going when things are hard.
That's good.
Yeah, I would just say, that's literally it. I can't think of a different. I'm not a wordsmith or anything over here. So I'd say, when stuff's hard, you keep pushing through. You do what you need to do, and you take care of business even when it's tough. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. It was one of the reasons that we, designed the Pressing On t-shirts that, hundreds of families have now worn that just simply say, not giving up, like they're some of the most comfortable t-shirts actually. Like some people, whether it's girls on my softball team, family members, friends in other states, they're like, oh my goodness, where do you get those t-shirts from? So lots of people are wearing those Pressing On, not giving up t-shirts, but it's all about the theme of perseverance. So once again, appreciate you guys sharing your story of perseverance today on the Pressing On podcast. And just a reminder to our listeners once again that if you'd like to partner with Clay in his marathon run that'll take place here in Pittsburgh the first week of May, he's running 26.2 miles to benefit hospitalized families through Pressing On. If you want to read more about that, you can go to pressingon.org/Clays Run. That's pressingon.org/Clays Run. Before we go, what's the easiest way to follow you guys on social media or online these days?
I would just say for me, if you want to follow what I'm doing, I have a podcast I run called The Bro and the Nerd. My brother and I do it. We also have Instagram under that handle as well. I don't do much under my own name. If you're interested in just me, myself, what I post is just on Facebook, really. Not a huge social media presence under just me. But
got it. And tell everybody again the podcast once again in case people didn't catch it.
Oh, yeah, it's called The Bro and the Nerd because I'm a big nerd and my brother's a bro. It's a health and fitness podcast. And if you like entertaining but knowledgeable things, I would definitely recommend it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, go check out The Bro and the Nerd on your podcast platform of choice. How about you, Lauren?
I think I'm pretty locked down on social media as a middle school teacher. So
gotcha.
You can maybe look for me. If we have a mutual friend, I might show up. But I think I'm actually pretty hard to find if you wanted to find me.
So Clay and Lauren Buckwalter sharing their story of perseverance in the NICU with their daughter, Blake. Really thankful for Clay, Lauren, Roby, Blake, the entire Buckwalter family, and what they mean to us and to Pressing On. Definitely go check out pressingon.org/Clays Run to learn more about Clay's marathon that's upcoming here the first week of May in 2024. Clay and Lauren, really appreciate it. Thanks again for joining the Pressing On podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks.